maize prices dropped to 350 cedis a bag, which is below the production of the cost of a bag of maize. And so government had to come into the market, introduce a minimum guaranteed price, and say that any farmer who wants to sell his maize at 450 cedis, the National Buffer Stock Company will buy it. And so minimum guaranteed price is a whole complex of things that you need in order that you can have sustainable agriculture that produces enough food at an affordable price to be able to feed your citizens.
Does the spending that the government do on that, and in a sense subsidizing the crop, how do you make that back?
I think it's a public good. For instance, in Ghana, we subsidize the cost of fertilizers in order to increase our output. We subsidize the cost of improved seeds in order that the farmers can have access to good seeds. I mean, when we started supplying seeds to farmers, there was a case in which one farmer had used the same seed for 20 years. He was barely making 1 bag of maize per acre. And so you need to give him good seeds that give him 20 bags an acre, 10 times what he gets from using the old seeds. And because the seeds are expensive, government has to come in a way to subsidize them, yes.
Mr. De Croo, this is, in a way, a part of this is you don't have a mic next to you? We'll share mics. This is part of the Doha Forum tradition. From the UNDP perspective, the economic transformation aspect of it, I think there's the underlying factor of governance, which is what you help with and kind of helping with these skills. So what are you doing, and how do you see UNDP helping really most African countries to unlock this investment and accelerate inclusive growth, really through the governance prism?
No, thank you. Great question. I would like to kind of link it to what Mr. President just said. Indeed, if you look at the potential of agriculture on the African continent, fortunately, a big part of agriculture is what you call subsistence agriculture, which is basically organized poverty. This is tremendously hard work, very often totally in the informal economy, with productivity levels which are just too low. And so if you want to improve those productivity levels, you need some type of mechanization, and you need access, for example, to fertilizers. That needs investment. That investment actually is there. I mean, there's not a lack of capital in the world today. The problem is that you are not able today to allocate capital to those needs, and I think the agricultural world needs have been detailed, because of certain levels of uncertainty, or a perception of uncertainty. Because one of the things we see is that the perception of risk on the African continent is actually quite different than the reality of risk. Very often with investors, their perception of risk is much higher than the reality. That is where we can play a major role. For example, in making sure that investment goes into mini-grids, which have the capacity of bringing electrification in very rural areas. Now, to lower that risk, we work together with governments in creating, for example, legal frameworks which make those investments attractive, but also in co-investing. I mean, co-investing, for example, with local communities leads to local ownership. Local ownership, to me, is one of the basic elements of development and of sustainable development. If you want development investments to be long-term, local ownership really is an essential element, so that you can also share the benefits of that. And then we are sitting on the side of local governments in their negotiations with financing institutions such as the World Bank. I think that today, the evolution of technology, which leads to investments which are lower scale investments but more spread out, for example in the energy sector, and also the sophistication of capital markets today offers a huge opportunity where we can play a role in unlocking the potential.
And you're seeing that risk appetite shift a little bit? Even in my reporting, I talked to people like in private credit, they're looking at a lot more happening in some African countries. So you're seeing this global capital base moving towards it.
Well, I mean, as I said, people who provide financing are looking for a certain return. Now, the returns potentially, I mean, the basic elements of the African continent are actually very positive. I mean, this is a young population with high needs, and actually which is with a population that adapting technology, because you very often start from a blank page. So the basics for an investor are actually, you would say, much more positive in Europe or Northern America. You just need a few elements to unlock that, and that's our role.
Ms. Your Excellency Fahad Al-Soiti, the question really is, keeping on the economic development side of it, QFFD, Qatar Fund for Development, focuses on, economic development is one of the verticals that you do, and it's an expanding segment of the fund. I'm wondering, where are you seeing these opportunities to accelerate, what sectors, and how do you deploy this capital in the ways that you find to be most beneficial? Like, what are you looking at in terms of metrics and industries?
Thank you very much for these opportunities, and really will recap of what His Excellency mentioned, the President and the administration of the UNDP. I think the key elements is the challenge that we have today is how can we tackle, creating new jobs. The economic empowerment is literally a new way of that we tackle in Africa. As they stated, by the administration here, is there are huge opportunities, that we can create in Africa, and we believe there is a huge way that we can do things. But the first things that we've been talking about is the private sectors. We cannot create only, depends on the government aspect that we can work on this. So we need to create job through the private sectors, and to have these things, we need to invest on the capital side, For us to, as Qatar Fund for Development, what we're looking for now is to get away from the traditional way that how we are funding it, and going more on the private sector aspects. I think this is reducing the burden, on the governments. Government cannot just keep taking loans and loans and loans. This will not help. I think the future is really how the government can depend more on the private sectors. This is where we can create, more opportunities, for others that can work on that aspect. His Excellency just mentioned about the agriculture's ways, the demand is huge. And not only this, there are huge people looking at Africa now on the mining, and how can we utilize the mining resources. But we need the experts to come together to building capacity on this. And we have the chance to speak before, with His Excellency, the President of Ghana, that he's asking us, to work in this personalized learning, and how can we go more on the skills, for these things, because this is the future, utilizing the right natural resources for this. Qatar have done this, before. 50 years ago, we built strongly, and building capacity where we are, 50 years where we are today. This is all, and we depend more now on the private sectors and on our countries. You see, so reducing the burden again on the government side, strengthening on the private sectors. So for us, what we want to see the future is the strengthening on the private sector issues. Thank you.
I think that helps me transition to the next kind of bucket that we have here, which is the education side, and really great to have you, Your Excellency Jakaya Kikwete. We're talking skills, probably the building blocks beneath that, and this is what you've been focusing on in your post-government career, I guess. So what kind of investments in education do you see driving this long-term, transformation, and how are you going about raising that money needed to affect that change?
Well, let me first say that I've been involved in education in my capacity as chair of the Global Partnership for Education. This is an organization that was established by the G7 2 decades ago. It is housed at the World Bank. The The purpose of this organization is really to assist low and lower middle income countries in transforming their education systems and ensure that every child has access to quality education. And it's an organization that its funding mainly has been from the donors, the G7 countries, and usually have a 5-year cycle. The last one was in 2021, which was held in London, co-chaired by, co-funded by, co-hosted by Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and the President of Kenya, that time, Uhuru Kenyatta. And before that, it was President Macron and President Macky Sall. And of course, next year we expect the Prime Minister of Italy, Excellency Meloni, and the President of Nigeria, Tinubu, are going to co-host the next replenishment. So that's how we get funding for education. Of course, we at the Global Partnership for Education are not dictating. We work with the countries on transformation of their education systems. It is the countries that decide what specific areas of interest that they need to be assisted. Of course, over the years, we have been able to assist 372 million children to get to school. 4.7 million teachers have been trained. And over 200 million textbooks have been provided. So these are the main pillars. But of course, with countries, our interest really is on skills development. Skills development. Of course, we do foundational learning. It's an area that where we invest money. But at the same time, with the reality of the world today, digital age. So how children are going to get digital skills with AI and all the technological advancements that is happening. So, but of course, as I said, it is country ownership. It is the countries that own. Because the other aspect that we do, and that's why you find wherever there is a leader from the G7 co-hosting, there is a leader from the developing countries who is there. The aspect from the developing countries is that the basis of investment in education is domestic. It is domestic. So in the last replenishment, where President Kenyatta has been the championing domestic financing of education, the threshold has been let countries contribute at least 20% of the national budget for education. And Ghana is one of those countries that are contributing more than 20% of the budget for education. And this is an area of emphasis. So we hope also President Tinubu is going to be in the forefront of advancing that agenda, talking among peers to impress upon them that these are our children, their education benefits us, and therefore we have to invest more. So in terms of funding, definitely we have this model of funding for where the donors actually, led by one of the G7 countries, talking among their peers, encouraging them to contribute money among the developed countries. And we think also Qatar has been one of the countries that in this replenishment Canada has promised to contribute $20 million, but we believe Qatar can do more.
Fundraising is great, okay.
We believe Cartel can do more, and I think we are meeting.
Yes, yeah.
In fact, one of the incentives for me to come to the Doha Forum when I got the invitation was that a meeting with Cartel Fund for Development so that we can talk. I'm here for the replenishment. Of course, in the next replenishment, our objective now, this time we've done 372 million. But in the next replenishment, we are looking at assisting children, 750 million children in low and lower middle income countries to have access to better education. We plan to train 6 million teachers, 6 million teachers, and we plan to give over 350 million textbooks so that at least they have a good teacher, they have textbooks and other learning and teaching materials. In a nutshell, this is what we at GP are doing, and thank you for this opportunity. At least I've talked about the replenishment earlier on before I meet the donors.
All right, good stuff. Thank you. Well, I think he teed you up for this, President Mahama. So the 20% of government expenditures on education. Yeah, that's very significant. So that's a big bet that you're making. Obviously, it's your people. So
Yeah, for me, I think that it's not as much the quantum as it is how efficiently you use that money. And so we're looking at how we can make costs, we can spread, our resources to get a better outcome. One of the places that expends most of our funding in education is the secondary level. There's been a bit of neglect at the basic level, and so we're going to do a pivot to foundational learning. Getting the children to master the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Because we notice that if you have a weak basic foundation, when you get to the secondary, it's very difficult for the child to catch up. And we're beginning to see it in the results that are coming out of the West African secondary school education. There's weakness in math, there's weakness in writing and constructing sentences properly. So for us, we're going to look at foundational learning again. But most importantly is encouraging technical and vocational educational training. The world changes and we must constantly reform our educational systems. We inherited the British grammar school system that puts a lot of value on speaking very good English and all that, but not being very functional with skills, working with your hands. Today, if you go and speak to captains of industry in Ghana, you say, what kind of skills are you looking for? They're looking for middle-level technicians, more than professors and other high academic laurels. And yet we're not training them in sufficient numbers for the world of work. And so you have a structural unemployment problem because yes, there are jobs looking for technicians, engineers, and the like, and yet you're producing more business administration graduates, more marketing graduates, more graduates in the humanities. And so there's a misfit there. And so one of our major focuses is to expand access to technical, vocational, and educational training.
that's really interesting.
The other thing I can add there, the information we have is that by 2030, there are going to be 230 million digital jobs in Africa. We have to equip our young people with the skills to be able to take advantage of that. By 2050, out of every 3 children, 1 is an African. It's going to be an African. After every 4 people, we don't equip our children with the skills that they can thrive in this digital age world. it's really going to be a problem. We'll have so many people, young people, ready to be hired, to be rented by, and they may be rented by the bad guys, the drug people, the terrorists, and all these criminals. So this is the reality. That's why we really have got to take education seriously. That's why I volunteered to spend part of my retirement to this worthy cause.
Mr. De Croo, so hearing this, there's the digital economy in a way, and the jobs of the future to train for. But on the other hand, there's still the regular, like the skills that are needed to do the plumbing and the agricultural and the manufacturing. And I'm wondering, as we only mentioned AI once so far, so that's not too bad, but we will talk a bit more about, like, everything is focused on AI and these agents and they're looking at the future. How does UNDP, like, how do you go on those dual tracks in a way to help these countries figure out?
Well, one is not excluding the other. I think too often in what we call the classic developing world, there's kind of this idea that, some of those countries are what we call fragile states, least developed countries. And since they are, the technologies that we're going to teach them is the technologies that the Western world used to use in the 60s and the 70s. That's wrong. I always found that completely besides the point. I mean, the technology that we need to use on the African continent is exactly the same technology that we use throughout the world. And giving access to that is actually key. And you say, well, we need plumbers, we need electricians and so on. Well, if you looked at plumbing systems and electrical systems these days, I mean, all these things are highly technological. And there's absolutely no reason that the African continent should be using the technologies of 50 years ago. I mean, why would that actually be the case? When you have such a young population that is incredibly entrepreneurial. I mean, if you go throughout the African continent, I mean, how many innovation hubs, how many startup hubs do you have today? I mean, we have to tap into that entrepreneurial talent as much as is happening in other places of the world. And so I applaud the investments that are being made in education. I mean, that's the basics. If you don't do the basics, well, it's hard to use technology. Technology can be incredibly powerful, but of course you still need a human element to use it, to adapt it, and so on. So that is why, besides what is happening in education, you also need to invest in the next level. The next level is giving young people access to technologies that they can use in small scale entrepreneurship. At UNDP, we have one project which is called Timbuktu. Timbuktu is actually organizing it in 8 different innovation centers based on agriculture, based on other elements, but really making that transition of what we could call like higher level technology, but then bring it down to smaller scale entrepreneurship. As being said, I think you said one out of 3 children will be in Africa, worldwide will be in Africa. Too often this is being seen as a problem. I don't see it as a problem. I see it as a gigantic opportunity, and the entrepreneurial potential on the African continent is second to none. It is second to none. It's up to us to create the environment and to give the tools to a young population, and they will do it. I mean, they are more entrepreneurial, they're more technological savvy than we are. We just have to create the potential to untap that entrepreneurial potential on the African continent.
Thank you. Good. This is a good segue to Your Excellency Soleti. So QFFD, I think you're also kind of retooling in a way of how you approach this to supply, skill-based learning and those skill-based labor. So can you give us some examples of what you're doing?
Sure. Thank you very much. Let me comment first on His Excellency. I will comment not on DBE, I will comment on your country in Tanzania, because Tanzania have taken now steps, that where they bring vocational training starting in primary education, which is very important. I think this is a huge steps that been taken by the government of Tanzania. We recognize this a lot. But again, not lots of countries have done what Ghana have done. 20% commitment that have been raised, and I know that Ghana have made a lot on that, because the same time that they increased the commitment to education, the same time was huge commitment, to pay back after COVID, and we really stand heavy, with Ghana, how they have managed this very, very well. So thank you, President. You have made great progress, of how you are managing your financing mechanisms, but at the same time, you have keep your commitment, because we were really afraid that this commitment will go down. But under your leadership, I think this is very important, and this shows the world, how this very important aspect. So from Qatar Fund for Development, we strongly believe, we all fully agreed, that vocational training is needed, from that aspect. But our experience is, which is very important, how can we strengthen the MFIs? How can we strengthen the good financing system inside the countries? If we want these entrepreneurs, coming together and work together on that, we need a strong financial system that have good credibility. The default rates need to go very low, so the standard default rate is really between 1% and 2%. But sometimes we see default rates is going to 40 and 50%. Will ask people to go away. It's a huge risk. People will not be interested to go in. But we see some countries are doing very well. Some countries like Ghana and Ethiopia and Kenya and other countries, really they have very, very good system, but not the whole continent, of Africa. That's why MFIs is playing a big role on that. We need to strengthen MFIs. We need to create more on the financing. We need the youth and young people to go and to have very good banking system, because the link, between economy and the financing is coming together, so you cannot split these things together. So from our side is, we want to scale on the MFIs. We need the MFIs to have the more credible side, and we need the flexibility from the central bank in these countries, to work together to strengthen the skills, for the MFIs. Thank you.
On the financing, I just wanted to follow up on that. So so when you go out at Q50 and you find a project and you already have your own money, and how do you leverage that? How do you go out and get like more grants, more blended finance, concessional, like private sector? Is that becoming a part of the model for you?
Yeah, the model used to be grants, but this doesn't work very well, for us. Honestly, the things that what we want to do now and strengthening more is going in the capital, base. So the capital base is re-involving our money. We will not want just to withdraw, the issues that we keep investing, having more credibility, coming to this MFIs that we can scale. And the very important things is sometimes they don't need the capital, they need the guarantees from our side. So we provide guarantees to them, okay, on the default and the default rates. We have a percentage that's been accepted for us, that we are working on it. And the key points that we want to align this together is how they align this with the national plan of the government, because then we can see what is needed in the countries, how can we strengthen and scaling on certain sectors. What agriculture is the key things. This is what we need to strengthen. We don't want to go in something only, which is not related, to what the government needs. I think the things that what we have seen is that we want to strengthen more on what the natural resources that they have, so we can scale on that aspect.
Your Excellency, Jakaya, that same thing, it's this partnerships and financing model to scale education. You're obviously fundraising while we're sitting here, but you do want to bring in other partners, I believe, right? Is that how you deploy the programs?
Yeah, because that's why this is called Global Partnership for Education. Originally, as I said, it was established by the G7. But in terms of sourcing funding, first, it's the whole of the donor community that is contributing. One is bilateral, the countries are contributing. But also we have the multilateral organizations, the World Bank and other financial institutions are contributing money. We also have the private sector contributing to the fund. We also have the philanthropic community also contributing to the fund. So it's a partnership in that sense. And of course, we have the countries, the countries themselves. Of course, the word we use in GPE is that we don't call them recipients, we call them partners. We have partners, we have donors and partners of donors in the development of education. So that is the model that we use. And even in the structure of the board, we have a board that has almost 50 people. Yes, it's a huge board, but you have donors from donor 1 to donor 6. Each of these is 2 countries. You have Canada and the UK in one group. You have Norway and Sweden in the other. You have Australia and the others. So you have all these countries. Of course, recently the US has pulled out after the demise of USAID. But of course, we're still negotiating with them to see if there can be any way they can also continue to participate when it comes to education, because as we say, education is the key. If we fail in educating the young people, the future is going to be disastrous. So that's the model. We have in the board civil society organization. We have CSO 1, 2, 3. We have also the private foundations that are also participating, and we also have a private sector representatives in the board. So this is the partnership, and so we have also a number of other countries, and we look forward to Qatar also becoming part of the others, because yes, I know. We need to be.
Mr. President, please.
Yes, I just wanted to add, international resource mobilization for education is important, but more important is domestic resource mobilization. Ghana has performed well in terms of its budgetary allocation to education because at a point in time we realized that education was the key sector, to Ghana's progress and development. And so as a nation, we took a decision that we will all contribute on everything we purchase 2.5%, a value-added tax. That goes into what we call the Ghana Education Trust Fund. And so that fund alone is able to mobilize sufficient revenue to almost hit the 20% mark. And so additional allocation from the national budget makes us easily overcome the 20% target. And so domestic mobilization is important. Of course, we're getting some support from USAID and all that, but I mean, we should recognize the fact that I wish His Excellency Kokete well in their replenishment, but the reality is that that kind of resource is dwindling. And I was an ambassador at the last Gavi replenishment. The target was for 11 billion. They did well. They were able to raise 9 billion. But I'm just telling you, don't be too optimistic. The world of today does not have the kind of funding, and the mood is not there to fund these kinds of programs. And so I believe that while we rely on boosting education in these developed countries, through these kinds of mechanisms, we must look at mechanisms locally that enable us to contribute to our own children's education.
That's a very interesting point. Obviously USAID also, basically shuttered at some point. So, Mr. Duku, what do you think about that in terms of appetite for funding?
I think that what we call ODA, official development assistance, those budgets are going down. I mean, I think compared in 1 year time, approximately 1/3 has been wiped away. I regret that, but we could spend the whole week complaining about it. It's a reality. The question is indeed what other types of financing can come there, and domestic resource mobilization is indeed a very important one. And if you look in many, and we're mainly talking here about African countries, there's pockets of taxation that in many countries does not exist. For example, taxation on alcohol and cigarettes. Very often doesn't exist at all, is a way of taxation which is actually quite efficient, which you could say also has some health benefits, sorry? Yeah, it's a syntax, and there's absolutely no problem with doing that. I mean, people need to make their own choices in how they want to enjoy their lives, but in many countries, that type of taxation or doesn't exist, or there is a circuit of just illegal alcohol and illegal cigarettes which are not taxed. This is a way of financing, for example, taxing cigarettes and alcohol to finance education. I think that's a good story. And so that type of taxation is something that, there's expertise throughout the world to implement that, and it's a way of taxation that is very direct. I mean, the difficulty with corporate taxation and so on is that often it takes a lot of time to implement it. I mean, taxation on what you call syntax is a very fast and efficient way of financing something which, from a societal point of view, is good investment.
And this is lacking in most, I guess, sub-Saharan countries?
Well, many countries don't have it, or have it in an efficient way, while there's a lot of, then there's of parallel import that is not being taxed.
Okay, so that's, I guess, the offset. We're coming close to the end of our time, and I just wanted to give a minute or two to His Excellency Fahd al-Sulaiti. How many here have heard about the Qatar Fund for Development's tie-up with the Gates Foundation? Oh, so many. Well, honestly, I thought that one slipped through the cracks yesterday, but I want to give you at least like a minute to tell us what happened yesterday. What's this $500 million going towards?
No, thank you very much. It was so excited for us, to announce yesterday with His Excellency the Chairman of Qatar Fund the new commitment of $500 million. But let me tell you, because this is linked with transforming, financing. So we used to work in the ground base with Gates. Now we take it to a different ways, of what we call innovative financing. So this goes to be capital investments, loans, guarantees, in different ways and in different sectors. So education, agriculture, health, and for us, the future is to look at, the investment in capitals on return for development. So this is examples of what we want to give. This is the futures of how Qatar Fund for Development will be working. And for us, we are not an investors, here. We want to invest on the development. So we want to make sure they're scalable and sustainable for us for the future, that we can work together.
That's really interesting. Like a minute and a half left, so let's maybe get back to the original point of how we're going to measure this progress. We come back here, sit here a year from now. How do we achieve prosperity in the next year, or at least improve the lives of your people? And that's how we do, Mr. President.
Well, I think that as the theme for this year's forum, moving from promises to reality, I mean, we must have measurable progress in every single sector. I mean, dashboards that are transparent, that our citizens can access to feel encouraged that we're making progress are absolutely essential. Statistics, gathering accurate statistics that are available to people to be able to measure and see the progress that we're making, I think would be critical.
That's really interesting. Mr. Jacob, for UNDP? How are we going to measure progress in the next year? What are the big 2 or 3 things that you're going to tell your staff to achieve?
I think the key element is unlocking financing, and that's really. I mean, we have to transition away from a metric where we have a classic accounting of official development assistance, which is easy to account for and easy to commit for, to looking into how much financing did you actually unlock. That's more complicated to account for, and it's more complicated to commit partner countries to, but that to me is the key. Is again, it's connecting a continent of opportunity with the financing that is available today. And really, it's a matching problem. The opportunity is there, the financing is there, connecting one with the other. Today is not happening enough, and that is for us as UNDP really our core assignment.
Well, reached the end of our time. I think for His Excellency Soleti and His Excellency Jakaya, maybe the progress is closing this deal between yourselves. So maybe that'll happen today. Really, it's been a pleasure and an honor to moderate this panel. And please give them some applause.
Make me un poco loco, un poquitito loco. The way you keep me guessing, I'm nodding and I'm